Hello, I'm Tim Haig. One of the pleasures of this business is that you get to meet some of your heroes. I had the privilege of interviewing Terry Pratchett several times, and he was invariably thoughtful, delightful, and ferociously smart. I freely admit to being a fan of Discworld. I've read all of them. Maskerade was the 18th of the series, and one of the best. This piece from the archive dates from 1995.
Terry, people are saying embarrassing things about you, aren't they? On the back of a book it says you're as funny as Woodhouse and as witty as War. How are you supposed to deal with that when you're better?
Well, that's a good that's a good opening comment, isn't it? I thought I was following you up to that last word. I don't know. I don't take too much notice of that sort of thing. It's written by journalists, and I was a journalist for many years.
Do you not write your own blurb? Because it's quite funny, is the blurb on the inside of the
yeah. You always write
jacket.
your own blurbs. You never be beholden to no one or nobody if you can write your own blurbs. In fact, when I'm halfway through a book, I write the blurb. Because I think if I can't now, in 100 or 150 words, tell people in an interesting way what the book is about, then I don't know what the book is about, and this is pretty bad going. So I always write the blurbs, yeah.
How do you decide which characters are going to come back? It's Granny Weatherwax and Nanny Og are the main running characters who are back in this. Although, of course, Agnes Nitt we have met in a previous book, who wants to be an opera singer. But how did you decide who's going to be back?
Explain for your listeners that aren't entirely up to speed.
There aren't any.
Each Discworld book stands alone as far as I can possibly make it, but I will introduce characters that have appeared in earlier books. You don't actually have to have read the earlier books, but maybe it just adds that little extra frisson to the thing if you see an old character again. Some plots tell me that they're obviously for a particular type of character, and if it's the type of character that I already have, as it were, under contract, then I will use that character. It's actually very similar to the big studio activities of the 30s and 40s. You know, you had a number of stars under contract.
So it's like a rep company, isn't it?
No, it's more like having a number of stars under contract, and a good film comes along, and you decide which one you're going to put in it. Some plots are clearly the witches' plots, as I call it. Some plots are for Rincewind the Wizard. Some plots are for the City Watch of Ankh-Morpork. It's just picking the right plot for the right character.
Now, if I'm right, the only character who's been in every book is Death.
Correct.
And he must be the most popular character on Discworld.
Absolutely, by a long way, I believe.
Isn't that the damnedest thing?
I don't know. Dinosaurs are very popular. And let's face it, had we coexisted with them, I don't think we'd have liked them very much. Human beings have this admirable tendency to personalise their fears and treat them in such a way that they can be made safe. And Death on Discworld is this figure with the robe and the scythe. And the
it also is a bit
glasses.
comforting because although it's probably a void, we're not entirely clear, you have just a few moments to get used to the idea after you're killed.
Well, I think the point that Death notes in the books is that the horror and terror people experience upon the realisation that they are dead is ameliorated somewhat by the sudden realisation that they are still there to be horrified. So that rather takes the sting out of it. So there is clearly some kind of existence after death on the Discworld, but I don't go into too much detail.
I'll try not to spoil too many of your jokes, but there's a wonderful passage where Granny Weatherwax gets into a slight contretemps with Death. And when she's won in her little sort of...
You're talking about the poker game, aren't you?
Yes, her Bergmanian, except they won't play chess because Death can't stand chess. She cures him of repetitive strain injury on that scything finger.
Scything, the same sort of actions every day. I enjoyed doing that scene. It was a lot of fun.
That one worked. I thought that was brilliant.
But playing games against Death is a fairly sort of stock scene in mythology, really.
But that's what you do, isn't it? You take stock scenes or well-known plots, and then you put the spin on them. You parody them, or you let them go in a different direction.
I always get slightly uneasy about parody. I think what I really do is go back to square one and say, you've heard this story many times, and you've always made certain assumptions. And now I'm going to retell it, but you cannot assume that anything that appears to be familiar really is the familiar thing you've always understood it to be. And that's part of the role of fantasy, I think, to show you something which you've seen so often that you no longer look at it. But to take that thing and turn it around in such a way that you see it again for the first time.
Is the philosophy intended and deliberate and worked out when you do this? Because there was one of your novels that had a philosophy of story, in which stories were flying around the universe looking for somewhere to happen. And if you tried to make the story happen in a way that wasn't consistent with the story, then things went wrong. And stories need to go in a certain way. Now, that was a philosophical frame. It was a very novelistic philosophical framework for that particular novel. And I wonder, do you do that ahead of time? Do you think, I've got a theme to pursue here, or does it emerge?
But I really did not have to invent anything. I really had to just put a spin on something that's already there. We say history repeats itself. We see the same things happen again and again. We say, rags to rags in 3 generations and all that sort of thing. We are, at a kind of folklore level, we are instinctively aware that there are little bits of personal history which repeat themselves over and over again in different ways around the world. Every time we say, he'll come to no good and things like that, we are acknowledging our belief that there are certain shapes in history that people are bound to follow. So it's a matter of just observation and bending it to my purposes.
Let's talk about Maskerade in particular now. Agnes Nitt is an ambitious young woman and a large young woman who has the drive to go and be a singer. She goes to Ankh-Morpork, the city in the middle of, well, it's not actually in the middle of Discworld, but it's the most important city, and changes her name to Perdita X Nit.
Well, Perdita X Dream, she thinks is a very cool name. Unfortunately, people tend to keep getting it wrong, and Perdita X Nit doesn't actually sound that good. You'll be astonished at how many young women who've been given perfectly decent names decide around the age of 15 or 16 that they want to be called something entirely
I like the
different.
young women. I did it too. She has a very carefully developed relationship with another would-be star, young Christine. And one of the things I liked very much in Maskerade is the way that the process by which Christine becomes a star. She's nobody when she turns up, like Agnes. And through a combination of circumstances, which I won't spoil for the reader, she starts to become a star through no fault of her own. And she starts calling Agnes dear and letting her fetch the flowers. Could you just put them over there, dear? And I thought that was wonderful.
But again, I think this is pure observation. There is such a thing as star quality. Now, of the two of them, the best singer by far is Agnes. Christine has a voice as monotonous as a whistle, but she has a tremendous stage presence, and she looks as if she's glittering all the time.
It's Madonna, isn't it?
Well, it's. Let's just say that
you can hear Madonna's lawyers calling.
In order to have a stupendous career as a singer, a good singing voice is an advantage, but it's not a necessity.
Bob Dylan springs to mind instantly.
Well, but I would let the lawyers call you, not me. And I just want you to, shall we say, draw people's attention to this, and that in fact Christine goes from strength to strength, effectively using Agnes's voice. Agnes is plain, Agnes is fat, Agnes is ugly, but she's got a great voice. Whereas
and a very good nature.
Christine can't sing, but Christine is a star. So between the two of them, you just have one extremely good singer.
That's a very Terry Pratchett device as well, isn't it? That when the things come together, I mean, it's very zen. Beauty and goodness not being the same thing at all. You're always doing that. You're always finding ways of suggesting that real worth isn't where we sort of automatically look for it.
Yeah, that's certainly a fairly basic observation in the witches books of the Discworld books.
Well, exactly. The witches are exactly like that. This business with magic, you show that very often the witches' magic is just a function of people's expectations. They expect the witches to be able to do certain things, and so that implies that they will be allowed to get away with things. But you also make it very clear that if they had to, the magic is there. So it's a potential, isn't it?
I think it's interesting to realise, as I did after I'd written the book, that I have Granny Weatherwax, who is a witch, and we know that she's an extremely good witch. And throughout the books, or throughout this particular book, she does no magic as such. Everything she does is good psychology, a knowledge of osteopathy, or really just the ability to stand still. But to be frank, the reason she is a witch is because she's a lot brighter and more manipulative than other people, not because she has the ability to snap her fingers and produce a magic fire.
And that's a witch quality. I mean, it's clear.
I think a witch quality is to think clearly. I won't give away the answer, but you know in the book, Granny Weatherwax tests people out by saying to them, if your house was on fire, what would be the first thing you'd take out of it?
Yes, where did that come from?
As far as I know, I invented it.
Oh, good. Right, fine, good. Just checking.
And the only accurate and sensible answer she gets is from a character who is regarded by absolutely everyone else in the plot as only 2 degrees north of a complete and utter moron. But he thinks clearly about things, but he doesn't make the same assumptions as other people do.
And he doesn't impress other people as well. That's another point, isn't it? That people are able to dismiss him.
One of the things that was a real problem with writing this book, which is largely set in the opera house, in the claustrophobic confines of the opera house, and which, at least initially, is the Phantom of the Opera plot, but as it would have been had there been a mix-up in the rooms and a few people had acted sensibly.
You carefully don't call him the Phantom as well.
Well, it's called the Opera Ghost.
Yeah.
No, I don't. There's no that's.
No percentage, is it? There's no spin to put on that.
I wanted to suggest. I wanted to give what worried me about the original Phantom of the Opera plot was that, in a sense, the Phantom of the Opera was given had a certain attraction because of his style. And it's only subsequently when you sit there, and I'm talking about Gaston Leroux's book, which was echoed fairly faithfully, I think, in the musical. Subsequently, you think, hang on, he murdered at least 2 perfectly innocent people. He deserves to fly. You don't. Style does not equate with morality,
as you showed in Lords and Ladies with the elves.
Well, quite. And so I took that as a starting point, and then that rapidly got left behind as I developed the plot in its own particular way. And then there are little jokes and asides that I hope people will spot and enjoy. But the real difficulty I had was I ran straight into opera. I did a lot of research on it, and a few friends smuggled me into opera houses and things. And I found that the world of opera is I mean, I haven't had to exaggerate it at all in the book. If you look at it in the right kind of way, the world of opera is absolutely insane. It relies on insanity. Opera happens because 200 or 300 people are nearly but not quite insane on a nightly basis. That's the only way you can get it to happen. And I heard all the stories, which I could barely get away with in the fantasy book, about famous tenors turning up so jet lagged. They've been doing sort of 79 performances in 79 days. That they're not certain where they are, or indeed what the opera is. And so the guy in the prompt box has to sing them the first few bars, and then suddenly, click! Yes, it's La Traviata. So off he goes. He's pressed the right buttons, and I heard all the anecdotes and all the opera gossip. And a lot of it in disguise found its way into the book. But I didn't really have to invent anything. The world of opera really is quite weird. It is not the world of the theatre with a few songs grafted on. It's a world of its own.
There are Discworld has proliferated now. There are people out there who know more about it than you do, or at least remember a lot more about it than you. Does that worry you at all?
No, not particularly.
Does it ever inhibit you?
There are levels of reality. There is a reality in which Sherlock Holmes exists, and Captain Kirk flies the Starship Enterprise, and somewhere in that reality the Discworld exists. And I think there is no one there who really believes that the Discworld exists in the same way as this table or this microphone exists. But, imagination is only intelligence having a bit of fun. Sometimes it's just nice to act as if it really existed, and people buy the Discworld scarves and T-shirts and models, and they have fun doing it, and that's what it is. It's fun. It doesn't worry me at all. If I thought someone really believed in it, like really believed in it, then I think I might worry a little bit.
Terry Pratchett, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.